Alrighty. Oh, got a little bit of editing to do. Don't mind me. And man, Chrome is laggy, but that's fine. Oh, have I not typed that word? Don't mind me. There we go. See, I know what I'm doing, kinda. No data, what? It is bouncing around a lot. I'm going to fool with some of my window positionings and things so I can have a bit of a glimpse as to the terrible things that might be happening on the stream, because we are here to try to do Orbit Cake again. So I'm going to set it up to show stream health and chat. And Julio Cesar Martin shows up from Spain. Hi there. And I will reset chat to full on live chat, and let's see how we do. I'm not really starting very early, but I'm starting a little bit early and hoping to spend a couple hours or so working on Orbit Cake. And I can show you what that is easily enough. Orbit Cake is a plugin that I am going to try to get going. If I'm lucky, I can finish it today. You can also see on this screen kind of a bunch of other stuff, namely other things that are due to come out. I've been asked about C-Strip 2. Yes, this is C-Strip 2. I've also got a version of Pafnutty that is small enough to fit into the VCP rack configuration, and Console 0. I think I can do a version of Console that is much more lightweight than what I currently have going on. And that might be a... See, here's the thing, is I need to get a bunch of this stuff set up so that I can run some tests. I need to make some measurements of a variety of different things. One of the things I need to make measurements of is the ASR10 sampler keyboard. People encouraged me to get that so that I could do a set of plugins that sounded like sort of classic hip-hop and sampling rather than just working in the box. And the challenge with that is that sampling is also kind of an in-the-box style activity. So it ends up being kind of like Maggoty, where a lot of that is going to be about emulating how the recording and playback stages work. And that's going to be part of the sound. Similarly to how I've talked about upcoming versions of Console. Versions of Console that I will do if I reach certain patron goals. And I've been thinking lately that some of that stuff, I think that the goals for the advanced versions of Console, ones with letters on them, are often tailored around like existing hit records, and some of that might be worth, much like with the sampling, I need to find records that I have that I can record, repeatedly play sections from. So it has to be stuff that would fly for React channels. And having done that, what I'd need to do is come up with ways of doing these advanced console versions that replicate the sounds people are used to, that they associate with things like the EMI Red console, so on and so forth, stuff associated with classic records. I think it would be a better idea for me to emulate the entire chains, which might involve all kinds of stuff. And I will see where that goes. I have also let it be known on the last video that I have a notion of a sooner goal, and that is if I can get to $2,000 a month, I will use that as the trigger to get a Bricasti reverb for the studio. It'll go here where I currently have an Elisa's MIDI verb. And once I have that, I can start taking Airwindows reverbs and making them resemble particular presets off of the Bricasti. That doesn't mean it's going to be the same code. I have no intention of trying to copy the same code, but I think my ear is good enough that I can identify the sound of what the Bricasti does, and it will also include the sound of the analog stages, which I think is a large part of what that unit is. Bricasti is also known for making high-end audio converters, and not necessarily, measurement style super accurate converters, but more along your Burl converters, where they are known to be lovely sounding. And you can design converters that are lovely sounding for the purposes of being reverb. In fact, I have a fairly decent idea how that is. So it could end up with me learning more about how I could take, like a advanced version of a Raspberry Pi or something and building it into hardware and tuning the converters so that I'd have like my own little mini Bricasti for probably much cheaper, or open hardware, and could explain how you would do that, how you would take the software part of it, the feed-forward reverbs and all that kind of stuff, and then couple it with input and output conversion in such a way that the analog output of the thing sounds like super deep reverb. I think that's a very plausible idea. That is not always the same conditions that you would use for a general purpose audio playback. Hey there, OS2 Warp. But that aside, let me jump into Orbit Kick, that being the thing that I was going to be doing today. We're going to get back into our design here and get ready to do some versions of things. Looks like I have it set up to, I'm probably going to do the same thing that I was doing with the reverb of 0.5 is full volume of both the dry and the output. I know that is not the most usual way of doing dry wet, but I've just become really fond of the advantages of it, as far as, in fact, I could do that fairly easily. I can grab that from the recent project, in fact. If I can find it, I bet I can find it. chamber 2, that's the one we just did. So part of how that works is this. Probably don't need the comments. So all I gotta do is add that. And we're probably going to be fiddling with some of these controls. It looks like we have a whole bunch of these controls, but that's fine. The idea is to cut them down a little bit and find where the use of the controls is most effective. So that's what we had as far as making it so dry wet works the way I need it to. Therefore, both of these will go up to full crank and then sort of peg there. Technically, we don't really need all of these. This is kind of silly, but I suppose it's harmless. It can never really be 0. So let's actually ignore this. I'm not sure why that's there. Maybe I was doing something with chamber that necessitated it. I don't think it's necessary here. I could be pretty confident it's not going to do anything unexpected here. There we are. Now we can bring in the, hey, who is it? Tube, okay? Yeah, well, you're quite welcome. I'm going to do that a little bit more today, and then give it an hour or two, then close up for the day. And then later this week, I will be porting a lot of these things to VST and going through my whole process. Like last week was my week for showing people what's involved for any single plugin once I've gotten through this stage and I have something that works and that I like it. And we are back to the original stage of coming up with the original plugin. And you're seeing the code of it. So if we build this, this one warning will now go away because now we're using dry sample. And I'm going to want to think about what's going on here. Like what ranges of controls do I need and how many of these controls do I need? Put that in there. We'll launch this and start listening to what we've got. Here we are. Well, that's weird. Okay, so something has gone terribly wrong. What's happening is that we go up to here. You're adding this up to 0.1 and then past 0.5. Suddenly we only have full wet. And there's no further change. So let's figure out what happened there. I thought it was going to do a thing and then it didn't. And while sometimes I do plugins and just by myself and just run with it, let's find out what happened there. Then we can start exploring these other things and dialing it into a smaller, more cohesive plugin. So what times 2? That's param 10. Is it some weird thing up here? No, these are all 0 to 1. It should work. This is fairly simple. So what's happening? Here's what's happening. I figured it out. So the actual algorithm is fine, but this is from where I have wet. Like it's the same as gain control things where if I'm doing a multiply by 1, I don't do anything. All I have to do is take this if statement out and then it will be fine. That's because this still works just fine. But as soon as I crank it all the way up to where wet is full crank, we're having the same thing that we had here, where it's input sample equals input sample times wet. If you are beyond halfway, wet is at full crank from that point on. But that's not the same thing as therefore don't do the calculation, because now the calculation includes the dry sample beyond the 0.5, which means I have to start dialing dry sample back at that point. And if we hit that point where wet is at full crank and it's not being dialed down at all, this if statement makes it so that you're no longer even doing the calculation, and the calculation is what I need to bring in what's left of the dry sample as it starts to fade off to nothing. And that's what went wrong. So all we got to do is this. Nice way to build back up to speed, I guess, with the plugin coding is finding and fixing a very simple dumb mistake. I might not be the most high energy guy today, and that's fine. I think I can finish this one. We shall see. I'm going to confirm that that did in fact fix it. It often takes me a little while to ramp back up to being able to work effectively with this stuff, which is also the case when I've got a bunch of other things going on, and I do have a bunch of other things going on. In particular, I started writing in a small way again, fiction writing, telling a science fiction story. Full dry, both full wet. So that works. And that writing is something that I needed to start doing, but at the same time, it means that I am happy enough with how that's going, but I am a little scattered, and that is fine. So let's step onwards. Where did we have this stuff set? Here's our controllers. Look kind of like this. So, increment more is briefer base. Sure enough. I think that's an acceptable range of control. Gain, we're apparently not needing to do anything with because it's at 1.0 and that's fine. Sure enough, we probably can omit this slider. Friction? That's another question. I don't know what this is going to tell me. That's cutting off the lows. Smaller is deeper sub-bass swing, and higher is allowing more subs before gate. So it's almost like that could combine with this, the next one over. Envelope. My range for this is pretty wild too. So envelope, it cuts off higher. And if friction goes higher, okay, so if envelope goes lower, it cuts off the subs more. But if friction goes higher, it cuts off the subs more. And they both seem to be centering around really small ranges. Threshold is what triggers it, so that's going to be its own thing, certainly. Also, this is determining the range of actuation too. Tack and zone is doing something too. And we got some other sliders that don't do nothing. So let's look at friction and envelope a little bit, maybe. That might be a thing. Friction and envelope can tie together, I think. Also, here's something we can do in Twisted Wave, which is what I like doing to test things out. An effects stack. And we can run orbit kick, but then we can run span. And I might grab a pen and a piece of paper to make little notes on what I find in case I find anything useful. And something I would like to do also is make it so I can see chat in case chat says anything. You're over there on my screen. I am not blind to if there is anybody in the chat and says anything rather than just listening to me sort of be silent and code, which is one of the things that can happen. So there you go. So here we have a thing where envelope can go right down to nothing. If I make it go real fast, you can't see it very easily. So the super slow is probably just as well. I should also turn headphones up really loud just so that I can get a sense of what this is doing to people's monitoring. Because our monitoring can get quite loud, as you can hear. So here's the deal. Hey, Daniel Kessel, hello. We can make this cut off where we want it to. Although weirdly we're continuing to see something down there, but it's quite a lot quieter. And that's fine with me. But envelope is setting the, I wonder whether I can get another piece of paper. Hang on a second, I'm gonna run and get another piece of paper. I'll stop that while I'm doing it. You got a lot of gusty winds around. Also, I can probably do with look over here while I throw another log on the fire. Once I'm finished with this, I'm going to make some notes on what frequencies correspond to what, and I'm also going to need to check on different sample rates, because I'm pretty sure that's going to alter with sample rates, and I need to take that into account. Also, my pot of water is still holding in there. That puts some moisture into the air, otherwise it gets really dry with heating for the winter. Yeah, it's funny doing like Vermont plug-in coding and all. In Silicon Valley, not only do they have heating systems that you don't have to stoke like an old locomotive, but they have people cooking for them and stuff. And that's how the Silicon Valley people roll. And that's not how things work here. In small business indie land, rural kind of, well, it's not really rural. You got to do stuff like that yourself, and that becomes part of the condition. So it's overhead, it's additional overhead. Alrighty. Interesting question from Daniel. Is there performance difference between VST2 and VST3? My understanding is that VST2 is going to be more efficient, And VST has more features, automated possibilities, and vulnerability to bugs and issues. It's a little sketchier as far as the design is concerned, and that's why they are trying to eradicate VST2 in order to force everybody to deal with VST3 whether they want to or not. Now, that's not the only reason I'm not putting out VST3, but it's part of it. My opinion is if you have something that is working that people depend upon, it's a good idea to keep it around, but Steinberg did not want to allow that to happen, and so they are sort of at war with their own formats. One of the reasons why a number of people have been wanting to go to another format, CLAP, and Bacon Paul from the Search Synthesizer community has done things to help Airwindows be able to fit into that context. But enough about that for the moment. Maybe over the next coming week I can talk to Paul a little bit, and we can look into a couple of the things we've been talking about, because there are a couple of things we're talking about. Where we were at, however, was this noise. Friction may possibly be another preset, kind of like gain is turning into. We're going to deal with these things one at a time. So firstly, that's right down to 20 hertz. Hopefully that hasn't broken anybody's subwoofers. And we'll go on from there. What gets us to around 100 hertz? Well, this is right up at around 200 hertz. That looks like 100 hertz to me. What else can we do? That's looking a little bit like 60. So around 0.5 for that one. Also, it's interesting that it's showing some overhangs still. So let's stop that, and we've got a basic range. Hey, Focomas, we've got a basic range, so let's start exploring that. That was envelope. So I think we're going to want to have it go higher in order to cut off at a higher frequency. Like you turn it up and it starts cutting off more. I think that's how that's just going to need to go. I'm sort of cramming that stuff together for the moment because we're not really working here at the moment. And I'll cram it even more. Make a tiny chunk of kick drum. right here. You know, when I do the stereo one, I am likely to have it be a single output, and it'll just be triggered by each of these input sample things will be separate. There will be a input sample L and then an input sample right, and either of them will be able to trigger the thing. But it should be a central kick drum, simply because it works as a sub-bass reinforcement, and that's probably how it's going to end up being used. Like, I could be using this on recent tracks that I've been doing where I have drums and they're dual microphone stereo recordings. Maybe not entirely, because the thing about that is that would assume that the kick was the loudest sound, and that's not necessarily the case. But having it be there, it could prove useful. I suppose there's also the usefulness of having it actually run in stereo, so you have two of them on a stereo output, but functionally I'm not so sure about that. So yeah, anyways, these are the thoughts. These are the thoughts we have. And we're currently thinking about envelope, and let's leave gain out of this. Let's take gain out now. Where does it even enter in? I don't see it here. Oh, there it is. So it was 1. So if we, there. And now, we don't need param2 any longer. We'll put it back later. Or we'll put something on param2 later. But, tell you what, we're thinking about envelope at the moment. So, 0.7 times 10. That would be 7 as a largest possible number. So let's start with that. And reverse it like I said I was going to do. Now we still got the times 10 going on. If the highest number that we want is cutting off at 100 hertz, and remember, we still got to check to make sure that this is overall scaled, but I think we're getting into the zone here. I got to do some experiments to find out how that works. But 0.457, where's my calculator? Actually, that's not as hard of math as I thought. .5. So alrighty, so that has now changed this. So at this sample rate, assuming that we're using the same sample rate, and we've got to do a little experimenting to find out how that all works. We will now have it cut off at 20 hertz at its lowest setting, and then 100 hertz at its highest setting. Let's see whether that is true. Back to the effect stack. Verb kick and span. I can believe that that goes down to 20 hertz. And that seems to go up to 100. Now let's try to make it act like we're setting a hertz frequency for the low cutoff. AC, Aussie. Next for chamber 2. Cool. I'm glad that worked for you. So let's assume that we are continuing to deal with 0 to 1. Alrighty, so this is going to be the 0 to 1 BSD-like envelope. Make it to number is what do we do to make it say on the screen what the number is? Because one thing I can do is go and tell the audio unit that the numbers it shows on its screen are 20 to 100 hertz. That is going to be a thing. Focomus, it's an interesting point, seeing as when I start working with the Bracasti stuff, and when I get there and start doing that, it's going to inevitably involve a bunch of different reverb things. There is a lot to be learned. There's stuff that I'm not even currently doing, and there's a lot that I could add to that. In particular, you may or may not have ever thought about the fact that acoustical reverb spaces tend to not have functioning reverb at subsonic frequencies because those frequencies just go right out through the structure of the facility. The roof moves and oscillates, and so it cannot sustain at like 2 hertz or 20 hertz because the pressure wave, unless it is literally a cave or a concrete space, the pressure wave lets the low frequencies right out so they don't continue. And that is something that I can code to emulate, and something which I have not done that much emulating for with the reverbs, partly because it starts to get into this really complicated space where I'm better off emulating a preset. Like, I feel confident that I can do that and do some fairly simple modifications and then have the resulting reverb emulate the behavior of a Bracasti preset, even though I'm not using the same code, by adopting some of the same behaviors. But I won't necessarily be doing it quite the same way. Anywho, back to this. The heck was I doing with this? Well, for starters, I was doing that. This will still work. I'm just doing 2 steps here, but here is the bit where I need this to turn into 100, or 20 to 100. So we had it at 20 to 100 hertz, as 0 to 1. We've now got it so 0 to 1 turns itself into the number 20 to 100 hertz. Now we have to turn it back into our algorithm, because this is similar to what we would have in working with the VST. But we can also kludge it. Like, I don't think I had it locked into exactly 20 hertz. So we don't really have to have this all that precious. In particular, I doubt we need to go all the way down to 20 hertz. And if we do, we can just adjust that 7.0, have it be slightly larger if we want the frequency to go lower. So instead of 0 to 1 times 2.5, we got 2.5 divided by 100. .025. And now we're going from 7 to slightly less than 7, because it's always going to be at least 20. That's the thing. Down to the maximum of 100, which will continue to be accurate. Let's see how far off we got. It should sound basically the same. The metallic tone thing interests me greatly. I'm really interested as to whether I'm going to be able to figure out a way of ameliorating that. Like, is it simply just a matter of high frequencies? Metallic means a bunch of different things, and there's a bunch of different things that go on in these algorithms. So I'm going to try to lock in to what you mean by metallic tones. I understand what you mean by rumble, and that's very addressable. As far as metallic tones, that's a whole other question. Is this a mid-range thing? Is it strictly a high frequency thing? You know what, I think maybe I'm going to save this time. We're going to save the stack as orbit kick so I can load it up a little more quickly next time. Otherwise, it is just sort of it should be 100 hertz. It is. I don't think that is going down to 20 hertz. I think it would be nice if it did too, so let's fool with the adjustments a little bit more. What if we were at 8? If we were at 7 minus 100, so I'm going to want to get to 3.5 now. So That's actually simpler than I expected, 0.35. Let's find out where we got. And we still have not tried it with different sample rates. That's going to be a whole other story. One that I can probably fool with immediately. Like, let's immediately try this and find out what it does. Firstly, effects stacks. Load it from right here. Cuts off at 100 hertz. Is good. Is good. And tell you what, let's raise threshold a bit. You know, I'm willing to believe that that's 20 hertz. We're going to want to avoid it some of the time, though. So if we were at 20 hertz, and then plus 80 is 100, and so halfway would be plus 40. Is this going down to 60? I think it's actually a little bit lower than that. But there was another thing that we were going to try. We could do this through a brief edit. Suddenly we were at 44.1K and attempting the same thing. Now what do we got here? Is this going to be madness and disaster? Well, it doesn't go as high up in frequency as before, I know that. And it's going to scaled. It's not cutting off as soon either. So but also the threshold doesn't care. But the onset freak is changing. Let's see if we can change that. Ooh, and we're also decaying faster. That's interesting. Or are we? Maybe not. And don't save the change. And we are rapidly starting to get this closer to what an actual plugin would be. Meanwhile, in the chat, mid-range metallic tones. Oh, I believe you. I believe you. You know, one thing that could be causing this, my feed-forward reverbs do not include all-pass filters. I believe that is another characteristic typical of the precocity. I don't think Casey's using all-pass filters. A lot of classic reverbs like Lexicon and so on like to use all-pass filters to blur stuff out. That can also have different kinds of metallic effects. I'm avoiding them, but I think that does mean that things can combine together sometimes if you have an unusual enough sound. Pocky, interesting. I don't know. Pocky is one of my Bit Crusher plugins. I don't know. You're looking for it to be a lot darker? You're looking for it to have filtering included? I'll make a little note of that. Pocky too, but filtered darker. Yeah, I'll make a little note of that because those are the kinds of things that I can fairly, usually like exploring it a little bit further. I have something to work on and I can go from there, so that can sometimes work out fairly well. Back to this. So some of the things that are happening are this envelope does need adjusting. So what needs to happen? Like, we started at 96K. And our make into number is specifying a 100 Hertz tone at max. But if we had it at a lower sample rate, it is producing a lower number. It's not cutting off nearly as high. So we'd be wanting to, So in order to compensate for that, going to the lower sample rate, make into number would need to be starting to spit at higher numbers. So firstly, put all of this into another calculation. And then we divide everything by overall scale. But that means we're starting off at something bigger. And the whole thing needs to shift. So this entire algorithm must scale by how much? By divided by overall scale. So we're going from basically an equivalent of 1, as in not doing this change, to an equivalent of 96K, which is where we started. So 8.0 equals 17.41. Let's call it 17.5 and 0.035. Turns into so now if we run it and we're at 96K, it should be roughly the same. If this is working correctly, we'll see whether it's working correctly. Back to 96K. It's a little lower than 100. What do we have in zone anyway? Okay, this is increasing the speed at which it falls off. If we have it at a really fast fall off, what happens when we lower onset frequency? That's beefy. That is big. We do have a release click. Might be wanting to fool with this. However, that's not what we were working on right at the moment. Here, we got a little more conversation in chat. You know, you can set DBS to have a more blurry onset by just not cranking it up as much. There's a setting which sort of sharpens how hard it engages. If you set that to very low, it will be causing that kind of degradation. It just might be doing it in a different way. Where was I at? Oh, of course, I was going to experiment and see whether I've got a solution to what I was doing. Envelope very low. That is closer to 100 hertz. I think that's what I was trying to fix. So now, closing this, converting it, then trying it again. How close can we come? Ooh, that's different. All of a sudden, we do not have a functioning result. So somehow that did the opposite of what I wanted. That's not great. What do we need to do really? Oh, and we've got to close this in order to see that it's asking to save, which I do not want to do. So what do we need to do really? First of all, since that did literally the opposite of what I wanted, let us undo that stuff back out again. So if it did the opposite of what I wanted, even though I thought I had it all figured out, why don't we flip the script and do the opposite of that. Instead of dividing by overall scale, we will multiply by it. That means the change that we're doing is the opposite of what it otherwise was last time we tried doing that. River Tropic, if you're talking about what YouTube is doing, they must be putting a big old delay on my video feed, because the subtitles can't possibly be appearing before I speak. Also, you don't necessarily trust them, because that is Google trying to interpret what I'm saying, and who knows whether they're getting me right. But yeah, the subtitles will not be appearing before I'm speaking. You're watching the video on some kind of enormous delay, perhaps in order to help them do that. This isn't a low latency stream. So, there we go. Eight. So this 8 will become 3.67. And then 0.035. Will become 0.01323. Alrighty, let's see what we got. I was not expecting that result. Oh, we have a problem. What happened? Oh, that's what happened. Easily fixed. Let's try this again. Focomus, do you mean a 4K peak that happens when you're using certain plugins, or is it just in your microphone? Because if it's just in your microphone, you want to look into fixing it at the source. Back into the breach. Hi, Orbit Kick. How you doing? That's a little lower than 100 hertz, but I'll allow it. I could flip this, have this be the slowness of the fall off. So we're going to look at the high-pitched one. It should go down to around 100 hertz. Oh, your voice does that. You know, if you're looking at making synths, you should look into the Surge synthesizer, folks. I have thought about doing things like that, but it's a little past my range of... I mean, this is kind of like an FM synth in its own right. But the full-on making a synth is a little out of my league. Interesting. Now we are far too extreme. Didn't like that much at all, did it? That's cutting off far too early. Alrighty, so that did not work. The previous one did what it needed to do far too much, and then this is doing quite the wrong thing entirely. So let's take this away too. So that's the bit that was working. Maybe we should just kludge this, right? Maybe we should just kludge this. We can, of course, use one of the other knobs and just dial in a magic number in order to get it to work. As much as I have other plugins that I could post next week, I'd really like to get Orbit Kick sorted out. So this is a bit of the sadness, working out how I'm going to make this work. Let's reacquaint ourselves with what I was doing initially that was wrong and broken and needs fixing. We're back to square one. Sometimes that's just how it rolls. We're back to square one. Yeah, dive into Surge Synthesizer. Not everything about their stuff is the way that... And more than that, dive into Surge Synthesizer, but if you're interested in stuff that sounds like I would do if I did it, look into full bucket synthesizers. Full bucket likes making stuff where the internal mix bus of the whole synth is double precision. And there are some sounds that I can get out of full bucket soft synths that I couldn't get out of Surge. And that's the only reason. Everything as far as the ease of use and well-designedness of Surge, I think is actually kind of better. But the full bucket has the capacity to get sounds, the raw sounds that I can make work. And that is very, very relevant to FM. Because you can do that. I think the one that I liked best for that was Whisper. So look into full bucket Whisper and experiment with that in FM synthesis. See what you can get out of that. You might find that that does everything that you would want. Back to this. Did I remember to do this stuff? Let's find out. Back to square one. here is square one. I don't know what pitch drift / super VHS is, but I've got a bunch of stuff that does stuff, you know. Now we're neatly at 100 again. This is what it's supposed to be. Except for it drops a little too low. So quickly, let's play with that while we're at it. See the 1.0, that's reversing it. And this is reversing it again. So what this is doing, if we had a power function on it, it would make middle settings act like the control was farther over to the left. Because it goes 0, 0.5, 1. And if you do a power function, your 0.5 is going to become smaller again. However, if we flip it like this, we are getting back to the 0 to 1, but the power function is backwards now. And it means that that power will be, middle sections will act like they're farther over towards the right. And let us now see what we get. It's probably not going to be super accurate, but it'll be in the right vicinity. Once we've got that sorted out, then we can start fooling with getting it to work on other sample rates. And I've only got about another hour of this left in me, unless there's always the chance that it starts to become hugely inspiring and I start racing along, but that's not necessarily good because that tends to burn me out. It's not great. Here's our 100. Here's our super low frequency. This should be around 60 hertz. I'm going to say that's not so far off. That's not bad. So that's what we put into the algorithm. Oh. Full 100, 70. Now we're already starting to hear stuff that is very effective for kick drums, although I'm still interested in figuring out how I can get right down to that low frequency area faster. See, these are the kinds of things I like. Oh, is this, have we changed how envelope works? Onset frequency is changing the end result we get to. That's a concern. And yeah, we're going right down there. If we put it super high, do we cut off really early? I'm going to say yes, we kind of do. So everything is being scaled by onset frequency. Well, that's worth knowing about, but it also makes everything so much more complicated. Yay. Let's see. So what I'm staring at now is the way in which onset frequency is scaling everything up and down, and I do not want it to scale envelope up and down. So that's the concern. Where does envelope even fit into this? Apply speed, cube root speed times envelope. Okay. So if we just included onset frequency in here, what do we get? Well, one thing that we would get is if onset frequency is cranked up all the way, that is a 1. That means we're triggering at a higher pitch, and that means that we are it's been scaling it up. So let's put in some sanity checks. You'll see why in a moment. But we don't need to calculate that every single time, do we? No, we don't. We sure don't. Now we are doing something. We are adjusting it in a particular way. That's probably throwing off all of our frequencies and things, but that's fine. The important thing is what we might get out of it. So, envelope at 1 is supposed to be around 100 hertz. That is most definitely not what we have now. Instead, we have literal subsonic hell. So, so that's weird. It's really kind of freaking out. We're not getting anything like a sensible result. Like that's clearly 200 hertz. 100 hertz is like here. Yeah. We are doctoring the whole thing very strangely. Very strangely indeed. And that's because we're making this mathematical adjustment differently from how it should be done. Remember how envelope is 8 minus this thing? But as we are getting smaller, we're going to want envelope to be plus or minus something related to onset frequency rather than just scaling the entire thing up, because what's happening is we're scaling our lowest amount by, a larger number should be lower subs, so that doesn't make any sense. But onset frequency is a smaller number, so dividing it means we're making it into a smaller number. Let's do a quick flip, because that was working completely screwy and wrong. Doing a quick flip of the polarity of the neutron flow there. It's not really a neutron flow. It's just me getting a little bit loopy after hammering away at this for hours. Well, more than an hour. Around an hour. This might not actually be one of my biggest days. Okay, that scales. So what's happening here? At the highest, we can scale it. Okay, so that goes down to 100. What if we slide this down? Does it stay going down to 100 or not? Nope. Nope, nope, nope. But if we're doing this, and we scooch it off very slightly, what happens? Interesting. So times equals onset frequency. That makes it smaller as we drop the onset frequency. It seems like roughly the right direction, but we don't want it to be nearly as much smaller as that. So where do we go from here? Well, if onset frequency was 1, we would not be changing it. We have all these other controls. Why don't we use them? Can you guess what I'm going to do? Because I'm going to do a thing. Okay, param something. Now this looks messy, but it should give me a thing. Right now, this will do nothing. But we're going to fade it between that and 1. Come on, you. Waiting for it to open the right things, but I have to do the opening of the right things. Now here's where we left off. Onset frequency. Higher and a lot slower. So if I take it the other direction, what do we get? Oh, are you? Hey, I'm glad that you're having fun with that. Or are you music? That's the whole idea, is giving you the chance to fool with stuff. So what was just happening was, this doesn't work very well this way, but if I include this, it does the opposite thing, I think. So can we make this go back up again? The answer seems to be yes. Yes, we can. And we have a click when it overlaps. So we're going to mess with onset frequency so it's no longer quite doing this. That needs to be tightened up so it can't hit any of the danger points. Oh, hello, friction works at 0. That's interesting. There's your idea. Here's what we're trying to do. We want the fall off to still go to basically the same place. In an envelope and drop down. Interesting. So right down to the bottom. That's low. That's subsonicness. long as I label these and orient them properly, I can probably allow these bad outcomes to happen. Subs 60 hertz, except for it's not. 100 hertz, except for it's not. See, what I'm looking for is wide ranges of adjustment that will deliver like reasonable results. And of course this zone here is just the steepness of the fall off. And we get a click when it's set too low to actually function. We can push envelope's lowest cutoff beyond high and low. Or top and bottom. Let's try it. Or low F. It's exhausting my poor little computer. It's running itself really hard. Alrighty. Let's go for another half an hour or so, and then I'm going to call it a day. This turned out to be a bit of a tiring day. We're going to change the names of everything around a little bit, and the stuff that we are not keeping, like I suspect I can drop friction now. No, they don't be 0, they be space. And this can be param 2. Not param 7. And friction was 0.12. Squared, that is so now where do we even apply friction? Where does that live? That's where it lives. So there's where we have that applied that we had previously. Meaning we don't need this here anymore. We just moved this to param 2. Meaning we don't need gain because we've built that into the algorithm as well. And what do we just change all those names to? Because we should have this referring to that. For Comus, you know that I do have stuff like Hermipass for high passing. And let's see, what else? If you wanted to sub the really subsonics and then have all the phase shift in the world, you can use infrasonic. That doesn't have an adjustable setting, but it will really sharply subsonic filter at 20 Hertz. And that'll get you some, try it, it'll get you unusual results. So, speed is increment, so that's fine. I'm wondering whether I should call it drop instead of speed. Let's do that. Which also means let's change everything in scope. Now all of these variables say drop. Six. I have 4. Where do I find 4? There you are. Low F. And our param 9, we more or less found where it needed to go. This could change when I change sample rates though. Awkward. We may just spend months and months on this crazy orbit cake, continuing to wrestle with it. Looks simple, doesn't it? Doesn't this look like an innocent little beast? Cute little sucker, isn't it? But boy, is it proving an unmanageable monster. But that's kind of half the wonder of it. The nice thing is when you have something that's coded in a very simple way like that and produces unmanageable monstrous results, that's when you have real sonority and character to it, because it's being generated by a pretty basic algorithm. Meanwhile, I have this wire here so that I can see it and remind myself that my laptop runs out of juice when I don't have it plugged in. And now we can keep going. Firstly, figuring out what the heck we're even doing. Threshold is going to be threshold. Let's remind ourselves what we just made. I changed the names and stuff, so. No more drinking more coffee. I've had enough. It ain't necessarily helping, but I've drank enough. Drop is real quick. Oh, that's because shape is at 1. With 0 drop and shape at 0, we're going to want middle settings to mostly make sense, and this is not half bad as far as that is concerned. This no longer does nothing. 9 does, though. Here's our low frequency. I think we've long lost whatever numbers it was supposed to reach. High frequency. I may actually have to give up on making it have the numbers, like frequency numbers. It's just too tricky, man. It's just too tricky. There we go. Nice little antique modular kick. Lower frequency should be lower. That's good and low. This is not low enough though. There we go. We go low past the high, we don't get anything. And then as we go high, and so it's a sort of old school drop. How's 0.4? This is a warm laptop. I'm smelling the melting vinyl underneath it. Maybe not quite that bad. I'm not entirely thrilled with how fast the off is hitting. But I can help that simply by not letting it go down to quite as low of a frequency. And high. I think there's a lot of different possible kicks here. Really quick drop. High pitch. Here is a very high pitched kick. Same with the attack. Okay, crunchy. I wonder if I can enhance shape. You'll love it. It looks just like a Telefunken U47. Or are you? You're watching me. This is a good question. Where do the ideas come from? And you're basically watching how that even happens right now. So low is going to become finish and high is going to become start. And param 6 is going to become param 3. You can probably hear the poor laptop grinding away. Yeah, see, here's the thing is, the way this particular plugin has been happening is starting to work with how the stuff goes, right? And I want to mess with this a little bit. Because we're no longer caring about the numbers. I'm not going to be able to make the numbers make any sense. I am going to want to fool with it a little bit to see whether I can get anything out of different sample rates, whether it's like optimized for 96K or whether I'm still going to get sounds. I don't mind at this point whether it makes different sounds at different sample rates, as long as it can still be made to do something useful. People who have stuff where it's like, oh, I listened on 44.1K and then bounced on 96K, they're causing problems for themselves anyhow, so I'm not so worried about that. Hang on, do I have this making any kind of sense, or have I just confuzzled myself completely? That would be bad. I do remember the get parameter 9 I had at 0.4. There. Hang on, I better undo all of that because yeah, there's where we started. And that's why I was concerned. Onset Freak is also sitting with Taper at the same time. I must do this in a different way. Taper gets to be 0. And then all of this moves to 3. Envelope can move here, because this is going to move here. I do not like all of this VST-like envelope making to number. Oh my God, ChatGPT would not help at all. No, ChatGPT would not help at all. That'd be the worst thing. That'd be like the worst possible thing. No, you don't want to do that. Let's see, this was 0.4. Very good. Now how can we simplify this a little bit? Well, we could just mess with it. We're using the same names on the labels. Well, I mean, with a bit of luck, it'll work super well as an electronic kick. The fact is, I'm struggling mightily to make it be like, and it stops at this frequency, and I don't know if that's necessarily useful or valid. It's certainly not always the way I roll with things. Why am I so worried about start not being larger than 0.1? I am multiplying it. I'm not dividing by it anywhere as near as I can tell. Let's see if it dies if I do this. I don't see a place where I would be in trouble from. Like speed could be 0. But as long as drop is never 0, we're fine. And if speed is so small, the cube root of it ends up being nothing. And so we're multiplying by that, and so it silences itself if that happens. Gotta admit, I'm struggling a little bit, but I'm getting close to the end of the stream. Let's assume that that's going to be fine. And I wanted to simplify the heck out of this. And we no longer care what that is. This times 80 and down to smaller again, or times 100 down to smaller again, makes it become this, meaning that we no longer need that. And maybe this is a thing that actually kind of works, except for we got param 6 instead of param 10. And then everything is 0.5 by default. Except what, which is 1. Alrighty, well, much kick. Let's see where we got, and then I will say good night, or I'll say good day. Thanks, Sticker. And we'll just have to come back again next week. Effect stack. Everything else is blank. What do we got? All right, sort of vaguely kick-like. Threshold is scaling things. Maybe that's okay. Oh, a little lower. Very little drop, lots of drop. Very little shape, lots of shape. Good, good, so far so good. Start. Big range of adjustment. Finish. Faster. Not quite that low. Very low start. Don't worry about your monologue. I'm doing a monologue too. It's fine. scale this differently though. Like, same deal. This is relatively slow. It should be more like this for a native speed. We can do that. That was drop. And so we're going to do the same thing that we did on another section. But instead it's going to be param 1. And now that we've done that, we have just done the thing where we're flipping it, applying a power function, flipping it back so that the stuff in the middle will return the results that are more like the stuff part of the way up. And that's important for this kind of thing. And if that worked, I'm going to, oh, we're not quite done. That's probably enough though. Again, that's all a multiply, so it can be 0. So we no longer need taper. Simplifying things bit by bit. Stereo logs, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can always make orbit kick 2 if the initial wilder beast is too much for people. That, or just build one where you take away all of the functionality and you can no longer control it. I do kind of like it when you can control it. The question is just whether you can set it up so that you understand what you're doing with it. And that is the idea here. So, drop, shape, start, finish, threshold, dry, wet. These don't do anything, and I guess I quit before actually applying it. Nice and slow. Shape full on is a linear decay. Other shape is exponential. I like start and finish. That seems to work pretty good for me. That goes higher. If we don't like finish being this slow, finish can end higher. I should think you could automate that or throw LFOs on it. supposing we don't want it. No drop. A little bit of reinforcement there on the kick. More than a little bit. Interesting. Hey, welcome to Yamaha Subject Land. Drop. Since that's how fast it falls off, that's also your decay. And we join a dark techno club in Berlin. I think maybe we got it. I'll have to fool around with it to see whether it's still fun to work with at 44.1K, but this is kind of got there. The cutoff can still be a little clicky, but I'm not sure I mind that. It's a characteristic. Alrighty. I'm going to let my machine rest. And you know what else? I'm going to let myself rest. If anybody is still here, thank you for hanging with me during this. I'm not sure what this does for my YouTube channel and stuff, but it's nice to... Oh, and I don't want to overcharge my poor computer. That happens sometimes. I do not think a phase slider would do anything useful. Sorry. Anywho. I will catch you later. I wish my poor little laptop a nice rest, because it is quite warm under here, doing all that stuff, including the I should be sitting it on a aluminum thingy. I do have one of these, even without running the little fan that it has. I should be doing this, and it'll be much happier. I'll bear that in mind next time. It'd be better for the laptop. Talk to you folks later.